Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of the Engini Room. I'm your host, Carmel. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is a space where I bring in leaders to discuss the good, the bad, and everything in between when it comes to AI implementation. So let's get started with our next guest. Okay. Hi, Irena. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Engini Room. I know that you've had a lot of experience in, the trenches of AI implementation. You've helped build and scale AI products inside some of the most complex and highly regulated industries. So thank you for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself before we get started?
Thank you for having me, Carmel. I really appreciate the opportunity. I have about 10 years of experience in data science and AI across both building the models and product in healthcare.
hmm
And my background is in economics and statistics, and my MBA is from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, your experience is why I wanted to have you on here. So let's get started. Let's jump in to some of the questions I have for you. So, from what I've seen, it seems like you started out as a more of like a data scientist and then, helping ship AI at scale and some of the biggest health insurance companies. And now you help consult founders and are more in like the startup world, right? So how did you get to where you are today? And what kind of made you transition into the startup world? Obviously, it's very different, right, from what you were previously doing.
I think that it's a matter of personal preference. I
hmm
think that larger corporations have a ton of support. They have excellent management in place and they have a ton of existing systems. And I think that it's very hard to bring this into smaller companies. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring operational excellence when it relates to AI to small companies and
Hmm.
kind of help founders who are true visionaries navigate that landscape so they can perform at the quality we would see at a large corporation.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure each of those industries and size of organizations comes with like their own challenges as well. So I think everyone is talking about AI. Every company has an AI strategy, right? Every vendor is trying to sell an AI product, but it doesn't always work, right, in the real world. I want to hear from your perspective on why that is. In your opinion, what's the real reason that so many AI projects don't necessarily make it past the pilot stage? What do you think?
I think that's a great question. I think there is a lot of excitement about AI. And, people believe that it's like the greatest invention since basically the
Mhm.
locomotive.
Yeah.
And whether you agree or not, it's really important to remember that as a business, we're still serving our customers. So all our AI strategy should not be for the sake of AI. It should be for the sake of our customers.
Mm.
And I think that this is where customer research really comes in, especially in smaller companies, where you really need to see how AI serves your customer in a compliant, efficient, and safe way that also brings them the most value. And I think that when you're doing sort of this tool first approach,
Mhm.
you sometimes go to the market and you realize that you've built a great product, but there is nobody who's willing to pay for this.
Hmm.
And there is no customer.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It has to be like a really good product market fit, right? And when people are building products, they're not always thinking that way. They're like, "Wow, this is such an amazing tool. This looks great, but how is it actually going to work in the real world, right?" And you have experience doing that as well. You think sometimes the reason that these AI projects don't make it, is it a technology problem? Is it maybe like a management issue, things that, need to get approved depending on the project, right? Since you've been inside of these complex organizations, it's not so straightforward, right?
Yeah. I think that going to a previous point, even in very large organizations, there still needs to be product market fit.
hmm
And in this case, your customers might not be, the nice people on Instagram or like, maybe like some B2B thing. It might be your ops people. If your ops people do not find the product useful, they're not going to use it.
Yeah.
And completely regardless of what you've built, it's just not useful. So it's not a bad product. I always thought that a good product, a good AI product or a good model is a model that's useful. It doesn't have to be 110% correct. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be useful. And then you reiterate on this. And to your second question, I think that there's a cadence to the way corporations work. So you need to come up with the right product at the right time when there is organizational willingness to adopt and train and then when there are resources. So
Mm.
when sort of your implementation can both be funded in terms of money, because somebody needs to pay for the
Yes.
build,
Yeah.
and also in terms of willingness to accept it. Because if you launch it at the wrong time, once everybody's super busy, well, they can't drop everything they're doing and do AI now because this is essentially
Yeah.
not their core role. So
Hmm.
maybe off cycle when things are a little calmer, or maybe when there's a little bit of budget left, or maybe when one of the executives is very excited about this idea and is actually willing to sponsor it.
It has to be the right time, the right product. There are all these things that have to align, especially inside such a big organization, and when scaling AI, it's not so easy as you mentioned. And then, going off of what you described in terms of like compliance, something that I keep hearing from business leaders is that they're genuinely scared to ship AI at scale, which is understandable, right? We've seen so many like breaches and mistakes and in the news, right? There are like AI models that are behaving in ways that nobody even expected. So there's often a dilemma between wanting to move fast on AI projects and not being left behind. And then on the other hand, being terrified of getting something wrong and making mistakes, right? I'm sure you've kind of experienced that. And it seems like you've also built some governance frameworks that have given the teams the confidence to ship these products. So, in your experience, how do you build that structure in terms of like guardrails without holding back a project? And why is it important to have these guardrails in place? What do you think?
I think that there are a couple of issues that you raised. A
Hmm.
lot of the kind of what you read in the papers, right? Like all the stories about how AI ended up deceiving and lying and so on, are a bit of a different sort of realm almost, because in this case, they were stress testing AI, and they were stress testing AI based on a particular set of incentives they had created. So that's an issue with the model itself and the way it was set up in a particular environment. And it was almost a scientific experiment.
Mm.
I think that healthcare is slightly different because my experience is not running scientific experiments with AI and sort of, really pushing the envelope on what is AI could really do. It's
Hmm.
more how do you apply AI to useful business problems to make things better for our patients, our providers, our executives, and our shareholders,
Mm.
which is slightly different.
Yeah.
I think that you operate within several frameworks, right? The first framework, as you had mentioned, is the very important legal framework. You need to be HIPAA compliant. You need to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. Those
Hmm.
are non-negotiables. And the reason that they're non-negotiables is not even the fact that it's legislation, even though that's very important. It's because when you're not HIPAA compliant, my data and your data is not safe. So
Hmm.
essentially, when you go to the doctor, HIPAA ensures that you can trust that doctor to, sort of keep your health situation confident. And sometimes we might tell our providers things that we don't necessarily want people to know. Like
Hmm.
maybe you have some sort of a disability or some sort of a health issue that you don't necessarily want, to leak out. And that's what information breaches do. They essentially, expose this. And we have to remember that at the end of this, those are real people. And I think that the companies that I have worked were very cognizant of it. And they're very vigilant about guarding that information and protecting the members
Mm.
because they were entrusted with the safety and the health of those people. So, of course, they really cared about them.
Mm.
The second question is how do you protect your providers? Again, those people trust you with their businesses and their patients. You must sort of live up to that trust.
Mm.
And the way they lived up to that trust was taking state regulations and federal regulations and interpreting them with our compliance and legal teams into internal policies that then were implemented onto AI.
Mm.
And so a very simple thing would not be how do you prevent AI from doing all those crazy things you read in the paper. It's more like if I am sharing with you a piece of information that I am allowed to do under HIPAA, am I allowed to record it? Well, is there an AI note taker running in the background? Can
Mhm.
it be recorded by one of our suite enterprise tools? And
Yeah.
if it can, we should be able to disable that tool.
Mm.
So it doesn't record any HIPAA information and so on. So sort of like the cascading of policy down is very important in a lot of corporations. And again, my former employers, fortunately, were incredibly vigilant and caring about this.
Mhm.
I think that Another layer is sort of how do you make sure that AI models are complied in the sense that they're accurate, safe, and do not inadvertently hurt anybody. So any of the protected classes based on, the obvious characteristics such as age, income, and so on. This is something that, again, we're very, very vigilant on. And we really were monitoring very closely and tested. And every AI model actually went through an ethics committee that was ensuring that not only the information was guarded, but also that the model was safe and did not, God forbid, do anything that it didn't intend to do just on that level. So I think that it's sort of like more mundane than people think, but it also was part of everything we did. Like literally every single thing we had done was made to be safe first.
Yeah, so that's amazing. It's great to hear about your experience. And I think, yeah, there's so much hype about AI. Not everyone thinks about like what are the steps you have to take to make it safe inside an organization? What does that look like? It's not always exciting, but it's important, right? In terms of safety and especially for healthcare, which makes sense. It's incredibly important. Now I want to hear a little bit more about like the positive things that go into, I guess rolling out these major AI projects. And specifically, you've worked on major AI projects that have probably changed how teams work internally and then also have helped your customers at the company. So when you look back at that, is there like a moment where you saw the actual human impact of the work that you did? Is there like a specific milestone or project that you're really proud of that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things we had built had been incredibly useful to our end users. And what they really did, they made their job easier for them. So we never replaced anybody. What we had done was providing them the tools that they made them, in fact, much more efficient, much more compliant, and also made them much more accurate. So a lot of the concern in the insurance industry in general is just payment integrity. How do you play it safe? How do you pay claims accurately in a timely manner? And sort of, do not create any kind of mistakes or errors on your side, both again for the benefit of the patients, obviously, and the members and the providers, as well as obviously if you work at not a nonprofit, but like at a regular insurance company, also obviously for the shareholders. And I think that what AI did was a lot automating just a lot of the busy work. So if you used AI, you were able to just sort of, prioritize your work better. It helped with that. It helped with some of the aspects of claims processing. It helped with a lot of sort of like the medical work of like, how do you actually review documents in a compliant and efficient way? So sort of if there was a particular passage that you needed to refer for a particular condition for a patient, how do you use AI to find this particular passage or passages or sort of like notes within hundreds of pages, which their provider has kindly sent you because they weren't quite sure what you were looking for. So they send you everything. And a lot of the medical stuff would just say they would be able to like find a particular term or a particular, something they're
Yeah.
looking for easily using AI. Obviously, AI does not operate on its own. You always need to have a person there, but it's sort of supplementing and complementing the person so they don't necessarily have to, just do a lot of the busy work themselves.
I think it seems like it's tough because there's so many stakeholders and so many, different people involved. So it's important to do it safely and efficiently, like you said. And this kind of relates back to, I think, a different question that I asked you. But in terms of vendors trying to sell AI, right, to enterprises, like what do you think they get wrong about what teams actually need, right, in terms of like product fit, based on your experience or just in general? Is there anything else that you want to kind of add to?
I think that it all goes back to what we have discussed about compliance. I
Okay.
think that enterprises need to feel that the product is absolutely safe, again, because of their duty to their members and the providers and the shareholders, right? So you cannot allow anything that could potentially risk that integrity and the trust that was essentially placed in you, right? By those people.
Mhm.
And I think that the first thing is to ensure that the product is absolutely safe in terms of its implementation. I
Mm.
think that the second thing that people get wrong about enterprises is that there are the multiple stakeholders, right?
Mhm.
There are the people who are actually in charge of the finance, also known as the finance department. There are the
Yes.
people who are your customers. That might be the ops team or the marketing team or the engineering team or the whatever team. And then there are the people who are authorizing the purchase,
Mhm.
which might be legal and compliance because they're very like nothing goes in unless it's compliant. And
Yes.
the question is, how do you coordinate all of them? Again, in a very large enterprise, and large enterprises, because of their schedules, but also because of just the size, tend to move very slowly.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of vendors really expect a very quick sale. But the truth is that you need to create this internal consensus that's going to be robust enough for
Mm.
you to get buy-in. And that might take a very long time, depending on the product and depending on what you're doing. Also, honestly, it might just sometimes not be the right time. And
Mhm.
you might be able to sell in 6 months from now.
Mm.
Or you might have been able to sell 6 months ago because 6 months ago they might have had that issue and now they might have a different issue.
Like you said, everything has to line up correctly, and they have to be ready for that. And in terms of, I'm sure you've seen this, right? We've seen AI demos that look flawless, that look amazing. And then sometimes it kind of falls apart when it has to, the product has to get into real production. Have you seen that before in the work that you've done or?
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate
Mhm.
because I had very good customers,
Okay.
honestly. And I want to point out a very important thing going back to the enterprise side. Some of your customers may not know analytics.
Mhm.
Some of your customers might be English majors. Some of your
Yeah.
customers might be like terrified of anything math or engineering related. Having that said, they might be excellent customers. And the job of the customer is not to do sort of, complicated development work, it is to give you feedback. And the reason that I was very fortunate to have great customers, especially in the ops department, is because they were very candid and very forthcoming with feedback.
Mm.
And so we were able to show them multiple demos, multiple prototypes. And they were kind enough to assign people to test it. And those were actually their more experienced people. So the interesting thing is that they actually took some of their more experienced people off the floor to help us,
Okay.
which I highly appreciated because that was, again, it was just cost and time to them, but they still did it.
Mhm.
And those people would always point us to what was not working and sort
Mm.
of where the model broke. And what breaks is usually edge cases, which I cannot foresee, and neither can my engineers, just because we don't know the role of the customer and their life as well as they do. Doesn't matter
Mm.
how much you would shadow them or talk to them, like you're not going to know everything. And because we had very close connections and collaboration with them, we had actually not had that case. I imagine that if we would have just launched things without talking to anybody, then yes, they were somewhat likely not to be as successful.
Mhm.
But in this particular case, due to very close customer relationships, which I really valued, it was actually a success.
Basically, until a real person uses it, uses AI and uses these products, it's sometimes hard to know like the real impact that they have. And sometimes you don't know until you try, right? So thanks for being honest about that. One thing I think that not enough people are talking about is employees are using AI, right, at work, and they're not always waiting for IT approval or approval to use this on their own and be more efficient, right? This is just a question that I'm curious. Do you think this is a problem? Do you think this is like a signal in terms of where AI is going and becoming like more accessible to people?
I think that most enterprises, especially the large ones, have enough guardrails installed in place to prevent any unauthorized products.
Okay.
And most of them have versions that are behind their firewalls within the enterprise.
Mhm.
If your company does not have this, I highly encourage you to never download anything from the internet and always talk to your IT department
Mhm.
to get this off, sort of get them to download it, test it,
Mhm.
and then just implement this behind your firewalls. And I'm incredibly adamant about this. And I know that sometimes it's a really long process and you need to
Yeah.
talk to, a very long list of people. And it's really just, it's inundating,
Mhm.
but you still have to do it. And again, this goes back to unintended consequences of AI. and the fact that we do handle incredibly sensitive information that has to do with real people. And if anything leaks, you need to remember that like it's your data, it's your neighbors, it's your family's data out there. This is not like,
Mm,
something leaked or, my car broke down. Those are
yeah.
real people. And I think that this type of behavior is not it's just it should not be allowed, and we should all remember why it's not allowed rather than trying to like skim and strategize. No, it's like don't do it.
Yeah.
Kindly do not do that.
Yes. Yeah, I knew you'd have a unique perspective on it, which makes sense, right? So I think not enough people know like the risks that come with AI, especially if they're not very technical and they don't really know much about it. I want to use this tool, it'll help me, but they don't really know the consequences, right? Which makes sense.
Yeah.
There probably isn't enough education about AI out there. Yeah, right.
And I
So,
also think that the idea in large enterprises is can does not mean should. If
mhm.
your IT department had missed a particular app and you can download it, does not mean that you should,
Hmm.
especially not without consulting IT compliance for both.
Yeah, I completely agree. That definitely makes sense. So now let's zoom out a little bit and just get a bigger picture of like your perspective on AI. So in general, right, there's so many opinions on where AI is heading. Some people are optimistic, some people are terrified, right? So are you optimistic? Are you nervous about where AI is taking us? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in the few minutes that we have left,
Mm-hmm.
that AI should be thought of as a utility. So a good comparison would be electricity. And, electricity did make some jobs go away. We don't have chimney cleaners anymore. We don't
Yeah.
have people who are, going down the street and like filling up and lighting up the oil lamps the way
Mm-hmm.
they did like, 200 years ago.
Yes.
Having that said, all those people probably found better jobs and they're
Mm,
just, good ones. Having
yeah.
that said, can you create a massive electricity related disaster? Absolutely. If, being out of power right now is really hard.
Mhm.
And I think that AI is very similar. If you use AI responsibly, then it's great. If you're using AI either incorrectly or in a harmful way, or if you're just kind of using a tool to harm, then yeah, it's incredibly dangerous. But I think that, like, again, all those sort of utility type of technologies, it's ultimately making a better world.
Mm.
We just should regulate it correctly and use it correctly.
Like there has to be a balance, right, between, the speed at which things are developing and then also, like you mentioned, using it safely. And I think right now there are different opinions in terms of like legislation, all these rules, AI governance. So hopefully we'll, as a society, kind of come to the right conclusions in the future. But it's hard to know. AI is such an unknown, even at this point. It's so new. And then the last question I have for you is maybe something more personal. Like, what's the thing nobody told you about, helping build AI products that you maybe had to learn the hard way?
I think that I was surprised by the excitement
Mm-hmm.
and the speed of adoption
Okay.
because now everybody's like, let's do everything with AI. And the
Yeah.
thing is that when I get something wrong, it's not going to be like, so sorry, I did that wrong, right? And so the issue is that it says like I use AI in my daily life. And when Claude makes a mistake, Claude does not go back usually, unless you call it out or does, and goes
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that part of critical thinking is always going to be human and very experience driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really trying to like stick to that because it's very confident, right? And it's very easy to psychologically be swayed by this. But I'm always like, did you really get this right? Or did you just make this up?
Hmm. That's an incredible point you're making is, we can't fully trust AI, not right now. I don't know if we ever will, but like it's important to have human in the loop sort of process because it's so easy just to have AI replace what you're doing. And, maybe sometimes it's safe, but as you mentioned, we can't always trust everything we see, right? No matter how good it sounds. Okay, well, that was my last question for you. Thanks so much for coming on the Engini Room. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Engini Room. If you'd like to learn more about AI implementation, visit our website at engini.ai, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.